This isn't a story I ever planned to tell. Hell, I've spent most of my adult life trying to forget what little I did remember. But now I know it's been waiting for me. It's been underneath this whole time, and I think it wants me to remember. My name is Claire Myers. I'm 34, single, work remotely as a web designer, and I recently made the worst decision of my life. I came back to the house I grew up in. It sits on the edge of a moss-covered ravine in rural Washington, surrounded by black pine trees and fog that never really clears. A 2-story wooden box with a porch that sags like a tired smile. It's old, feels older. Built sometime in the 40s maybe. My mum inherited it from my grandfather. We lived here until I was 19. Then I left and never came back. Until now. My mother passed away 2 months ago after a long, strange illness. Something that stole her memory slowly, year by year, until she was just gone. The house sat empty after that. And since I was the only surviving relative, it fell to me to come clean it out and put it up for sale. That was the plan anyway. But the moment I stepped back inside, something in me locked up. The air in this place, it's heavy. Not just from the rain, but from time, from memory. The way the walls groan, how the floorboards whisper under your feet. It doesn't feel abandoned. It feels asleep, like it's dreaming. And I'm the reason it's about to wake up. It's been raining since the day I arrived, non-stop. 6 straight days of it now. The kind of downpour that doesn't just fall, it presses. A curtain of grey that turns the windows into mirrors and turns your thoughts to mush. I used to love rain. Not anymore. The first few nights were uneventful. I spent the days boxing up old dishes, junk mail, my mother's endless collection of herbal tinctures and crossword books. The house creaked like it always did. The wind whistled through the attic. The old radiator banged like it was haunted. It was familiar in a strange and bitter way. But on the 3rd night, things changed. I was lying in bed upstairs, unable to sleep. The wind was howling. Rain smacked the windows hard enough to rattle them. I had the lights off, just trying to rest. That's when I heard something different. It came from the vent near the floorboards, a small metal grate near my nightstand. It was faint at first, just a kind of muffled murmur, like wind, but patterned, rhythmic, like someone talking, but through layers of fabric and walls. I sat up and leaned closer. It was a voice, not one I could understand, just low and fast, like someone muttering to themselves underneath the floor. I thought maybe it was water in the pipes, maybe the old heating system bubbling through the crawl space. That's what I told myself. But then I heard it again the next night, louder, clearer, and this time the voice said my name, Claire. Just once, just enough. I froze. I lay there in the dark, heart racing, holding my breath. I didn't sleep that night. And when the sun rose, if you could even call it that under all the grey, I walked the perimeter of the house, looking for signs of anything. Pipes, holes, rodents, a broken speaker, something. But all I found was the same cracked foundation I remembered from childhood, and the same rusted crawl space door bolted shut behind the house. I'd forgotten it even existed. Or maybe I wasn't supposed to remember it. And I think that's when the house remembered me. The voice kept coming back. Every night since that first whisper through the vent, it returned, just past midnight. Always soft, always from the same spot, and always saying things I couldn't quite catch until the 3rd night. I had been lying there again, heart pounding in the dark, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. I turned off every light. No phone, no distractions, just listened. And this time it was clear. "Claire, let us out." I didn't scream. I didn't move. I just stared at the ceiling and waited for it to stop. When the sun came up, if you want to call that dull, soggy glow sun, I got up, made coffee, and tried to ignore it. But something inside me was beginning to unravel. By mid-morning, I was crawling on hands and knees through the second-floor hallway, pressing my ear to every vent I could find. Most of them were cold, silent. But when I got back to the one near my bedroom nightstand, the metal was warm, like breath had passed through it. I took the cover off, just a dark, narrow shaft, dusty, reeking of mildew. And then, no joke, right as I leaned in, there was a knock. From inside the vent, 3 slow taps. I fell backward so fast I hit my shoulder against the wall. My pulse was slamming in my ears. I thought I was going to throw up. I didn't sleep that night either. I just sat up in bed with the covers around me like a scared kid, waiting to hear the knock again. It didn't come. Not that night. But something else did. Around 3 a.m., I started hearing footsteps. Not upstairs. Below me, under the floorboards. I grew up in this house. I knew there was no basement. Just a sealed crawl space, maybe 4 feet high, the kind of place where you store rusted tools and forget about them. But these footsteps were deliberate, heavy, pacing. That's when I remembered the hatch. There was a small door in the back of the coat closet near the kitchen. I'd only seen it once, as a kid. My mum always kept that closet padlocked, and I was never allowed in. I'd actually forgotten it was there until that moment. It took me an hour to work up the nerve, but I eventually pulled the old coats and boxes away and found it. A wooden hatch in the floor, maybe 2 feet by 3, rusted hinges, paint chipped off like dried skin, and right there in the center, a heavy, black iron lock. It looked older than the house. It looked wrong. Like something that was meant to be sealed. I didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, I pulled a flashlight out of the junk drawer and searched the rest of the house for anything that might explain what I was hearing. And that's when I found the dream journal. It was in a box marked Claire, age 8, in the attic. Inside were scribbled drawings, crayon, pencil, torn notebook pages, stick figures standing in rain. A girl, me, holding hands with someone I didn't recognize. A boy in a yellow coat with no face. There were phrases written over and over. Don't go under. Mum says not to listen. It's not a game if they don't come back. And one entry, shaky, childish writing. I dreamed I pushed Thomas into the hole, and he was still talking when the rain came. I dropped the book and backed away like it had burned me. Thomas. The name hit me like a splash of cold water. He was my imaginary friend. That's what Mum used to call him. A boy I played with all summer when I was 8. Then, one day, he was just gone. I hadn't thought about him in decades. Not once. But now his name was here, in my handwriting, and I had drawn him standing under the floorboards. That night, I didn't go to bed. I sat by the vent with a recorder, hit record, and waited. At 2:47 a.m., the voice came back, clear, louder than ever. You left us down here. And then, 2 knocks. I tried to tell myself it was all some kind of trauma response, that grief, isolation, and exhaustion were blending into hallucinations. But when I played the recording back the next morning, it was all there, clear as day. You left us down here. Knock, knock. My voice cracked when I replayed it. Not because it was scary, but because the voice didn't sound angry. It sounded hurt. I wanted to leave. desperately. But the storm had washed out the only road connecting the house to town. I was 10 miles from the nearest neighbor, and even if I tried hiking through the ravine, the mud was so deep now, it would have pulled me under in minutes. I was trapped. The rain hadn't let up in 7 straight days. By now, the windows were coated in condensation, streaks of brown water dripping from the edges like tears. The walls felt damp to the touch, even though the interior was dry. I started noticing other things too, things that made me question everything, like the family photo on the mantel. It had always shown me my mother and my dad, back when he was still around. But now it showed a 4th person, a little boy, same height as me, wearing a yellow raincoat. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, looked again. He was gone. That night I dreamed of water. Not rain, rising water, cold and black and endless. I was in the crawl space, drenched, mud up to my knees, and there were children standing in the corner, backs turned, dozens of them. Silent. Still. Not breathing. Except for one. He turned around slowly. His eyes were sewn shut with what looked like hair, and he smiled. You remember now. I woke up screaming, tangled in the blanket, my skin cold and clammy. The storm outside was louder than ever. It wasn't just falling anymore. It was pounding, like fists, like something slamming itself against the house, over and over. I checked the recorder again. This time there was no voice, only laughter. Childlike, warped, and beneath it, a second laugh. My own. Except I hadn't laughed in days. That was the moment I noticed the basement stairs were wet. Not just damp, soaked. I followed the water trail with a towel, thinking maybe a pipe had burst. But it didn't start from the ceiling. It started from the floor, as if the rain was coming up. That's when the radiator started hissing, the old metal one in the corner of the hallway. I walked past it slowly, and as I did, the hissing shifted into whispering. I leaned closer. This time there was no mistake. It wasn't one voice anymore. It was many, all chanting in unison. She remembers. She remembers. She remembers. I slammed the vent shut and ran back to the kitchen. That's when I saw it. On the counter, next to the broken coffee maker, was a drawing. Not an old one. Fresh. Done in blue crayon. It was me. A girl with brown hair standing in the rain. Next to me was the boy in the yellow coat, and beneath our feet, a hole in the ground. Inside it were hands. By the time I reached the coat closet again, I wasn't even pretending to be calm anymore. I tore the rug away from the hatch like it had personally wronged me. The lock was still there, thick, rusted, and unmoving, but I found a claw hammer in my mother's old toolbox and smashed at it until the latch bent just enough for the bolt to snap. I stood over the hatch for a long time after that. I didn't want to open it, not because I was afraid of what I'd find, but because some part of me already knew. When I finally did pry it open, the smell hit me first. Not just mold or damp rot, it was deeper than that, like water that had soaked through time, old fabric, wet wood, soil, and something else, something wrong. The crawl space wasn't like I remembered. It wasn't even really a crawl space anymore. The floor had collapsed into a sunken passage, about 4 feet deep and just wide enough to shuffle through on hands and knees. A tunnel, dug through dirt and stone. It led off into blackness beneath the house like a wound, and carved into the walls, childlike and crude, were drawings, thousands of them, in chalk, crayon, pencil, scratched with nails, stick figures holding hands, kids in the rain, smiling faces, all blank-eyed, and at the end of the tunnel, a single word etched again and again and again: stay. Stay! Stay! I couldn't stop myself. I crawled inside. Each breath felt heavier than the last. The air was warm, damp, breathing on its own. Every time I exhaled, the tunnel seemed to close in a little more. I passed toys, a broken flashlight, a shoelace. Then I saw something wrapped in a plastic tarp, half buried in the mud. I knew I shouldn't touch it, but I did. It came apart easily, like it had been waiting to. Inside was a bundle of faded, rotted clothes, a blue raincoat, child size, and something else inside it, something brittle. Bones, tiny ones. I backed away, shaking. My knees slipped in the mud and my flashlight rolled. As I scrambled after it, the beam caught something ahead. Another figure, kneeling, facing the wall, small, still, with long, matted hair and soaked clothing. I whispered, "Thomas," and it turned. The face was hollow, lips torn, eyes sealed with skin, but it smiled and opened its mouth. My voice came out. "You left me," I screamed and scrambled back through the tunnel, slamming the hatch shut behind me so hard it cracked the frame. I curled up against the wall, gasping for breath, covered in filth. And then I heard it, the chanting. But this time, it wasn't just through the vents. It was everywhere. From the walls, the floors, the drains. She came back. She came back. Let her stay. Then came the dripping. Not from above, from the walls themselves. Dark water pouring through the paint, running in long, inky veins across the wallpaper. The storm had found its way inside. Not just into the house, but into me. I couldn't move because something inside me said, "You didn't just open the hatch. You let it hear you." I didn't sleep after that. I didn't even try. I just sat in the living room with every light on, wrapped in a soaked blanket, staring at the hatch. It hadn't moved, but the house had. The walls groaned more than usual. The floorboards felt softer, like they weren't entirely solid anymore. And the rain, God, the rain. It didn't just sound like water anymore. It was speaking in syllables, rhythmic taps on the windows, like coded messages. I kept hearing my name, in the vents, in the sink, in the radiator, in my own breath. It was in me. It wasn't a haunting. It wasn't even a ghost. It was something else, something deeper. I tried to run. I threw what little I could into a bag and fled outside into the downpour. But the road, gone, washed away. The ravine overflowed with black water and toppled trees. Even the forest seemed to curve back toward the house, like it was protecting it, or trapping me in. I turned back and saw something move across the upstairs window. Not a shadow, a silhouette. Small, watching, smiling. That night was the worst. It started with the lights flickering, then going out completely. I lit candles, but they wouldn't stay lit. The air felt wet. Too wet to burn. My phone wouldn't turn on. The charger sparked. Even my voice recorder hissed like it was full of static. And then the voices started again. But this time, they weren't just under the floor. They were in the room. The children I saw in the dream, the ones from the crawl space. They were here. I couldn't see them, but I could hear them. Their bare feet, walking on soaked floorboards that hadn't been wet a moment ago. I turned to the mirror and saw myself. Only it wasn't me. The woman in the mirror was smiling, eyes glassy, hair dripping with rain even though I was dry. And then she spoke. "You're home." The door to the basement creaked open. Not slammed, not burst, just quietly, gently, like a friend inviting me back to a memory. I didn't want to go, but my feet moved anyway, down the stairs, to the hatch, which was already open. And from the tunnel, I heard my childhood voice whisper, "We never wanted to hurt you. We just didn't want to be alone anymore." I stepped inside. The mud felt warm now, welcoming, and as I crawled deeper, the storm above faded, replaced by humming, an off-key lullaby. My lullaby, the one my mother used to hum to me when the thunder rolled. Except it wasn't her voice. It was all of them. Thomas, the others, the ones I'd forgotten. And now I remember everything. Everything I buried. Everything we buried. My name's Evan. I'm not the type to make confessions, especially not online. But after what happened, I don't know what else to do. Maybe if I tell it, someone else will understand. Maybe it'll help me feel less insane. It started about 6 weeks ago. I'd been living in this rental cabin for a while, tucked away in the northern hills of Oregon. One of those remote places with no neighbors, no traffic, just trees and silence. It was exactly what I needed. After my breakup and the breakdown that followed, I couldn't handle the city anymore. I needed quiet, and I got it. Too much of it, maybe. The first day the rain started, it was kind of peaceful. A soft patter on the metal roof, mist curling through the pine trees outside the window, the kind of atmosphere that makes you want to light candles and read a book. But by the third day, it hadn't stopped. Not once. No breaks, no clear skies, not even a slow drizzle. Just this constant, drumming rain, like it was trying to dig through the cabin roof. The roads turned to sludge, and the dirt path back to the main road became a river of mud. My truck got stuck the second day. I tried walking to the gas station 10 miles down, but had to turn back after nearly slipping off a ridge. It wasn't worth it. That's when the weirdness started. The first thing I noticed was the silence inside. You'd think with that much rain, the cabin would creak, the pipes would gurgle, something. But it didn't. Inside was dead quiet, like I was sealed off from the world. I started sleeping with a radio on just to have some noise. Except one night around 2 a.m., the static started. Shifting, that's the only word I have for it. It shifted. The white noise turned rhythmic, like a breath. Then it became a whisper. I turned the volume down. The whispering didn't stop. I unplugged the damn radio, still heard it. Just on the edge of perception, like it was in the walls. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I stepped outside for some air. The rain hit like knives, cold, relentless. I didn't get more than 3 steps before I noticed something in the mud by the porch. Footprints. Bare. Human. But here's the thing. They weren't coming toward the cabin. They were facing it. Just standing there, in one spot. Like someone had been standing outside my window, watching, in the middle of a storm that hadn't let up for days. I called the landlord. No answer. Tried the sheriff's department. All circuits busy. Told myself it was a hiker. Someone got lost, took shelter, then moved on. But that doesn't explain why there were no footprints leaving. That night, I locked every door, every window, pulled all the blinds. I even stacked some chairs in front of the door. Not that it would have helped. I sat there in the dark, listening, and at exactly 2:14 a.m. I heard it again. Tap, 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 from the wall behind my headboard, the wall that separates the cabin from the forest. 3 knocks, software deliberate. I held my breath. Then, from outside, in that same whispering cadence I'd heard before, came my name. Evan. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even move for hours. I just sat there in bed, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the bedroom wall where the sound came from. The rain still pounded outside, but now it felt different, like it was trying to smother the world, trying to drown everything out, except that voice. By morning, I convinced myself it was a dream. Sleep deprivation, cabin fever, stress. I mean, I'd been through a lot. The breakup, the accident, the therapy that never really helped. My mind wasn't exactly the most trustworthy witness. But then I checked the window. There were new footprints, same shape, same bare feet. Only this time, they were on the back side of the cabin, beneath the bedroom window. There were more of them now, too many to count. Some overlapping, some crooked, and all pointing directly at the glass. I tried calling the landlord again, still no answer. Cell signal kept dropping in and out, and the satellite phone I kept for emergencies was dead. Wouldn't charge, just this endless blinking red light. I swear, even the technology felt like it was giving up. That night, I brought my old handheld recorder into the bedroom, just to prove to myself that there was nothing there. I left it running on the windowsill. When I played it back the next morning, it was mostly rain and wind, until around the 2-hour mark. A soft tap, then another, then breathing. Deep, wet, labored, followed by a voice. My own voice. Except it wasn't. It sounded like me, but something was off. The cadence, the way the words dragged like waterlogged cloth. It whispered, "Let me in." I dropped the recorder. That's when I started noticing other things. The ceiling above my bed had water stains now. They weren't there before, and they weren't random. They formed shapes, circles, like eyes, watching. Some bigger, some small, like something was looking down at me from above. And it wasn't just that. My coffee mugs started filling on their own. Not with coffee, with water. Cold and brown and foul smelling. Once I left my journal open overnight, found the pages soggy, the ink bled into a message I never wrote. Why did you survive? I stopped journaling after that. I started pushing furniture in front of the doors, nailing shut the windows. But every morning, something was moved. The chair I wedged under the doorknob was gently set aside. The kitchen window, which I'd sealed with duct tape, was open. Just a crack. Just enough. I told myself it was wind, moisture warping the wood. But deep down, I didn't believe it. I began seeing things in the forest, too. Through the veil of rain, I'd catch a shape, a figure. Motionless, just standing at the edge of the clearing. No umbrella, no coat. Then I'd blink, and it would be gone. One night, I sat by the front door with a flashlight for hours, staring through the peephole. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Nothing. Then I heard it. 3 taps, this time from the hallway inside. I swung the door open. Nothing there, just the smell of wet earth. That's when I realized something else. The storm wasn't normal. It never thundered, never lightning, just rain, constant, heavy, as if the sky had been replaced with a leaking ceiling. And I noticed the rain didn't fall quite right. It didn't scatter off surfaces the way it should. It soaked through things faster than possible. Wood, metal, stone, like it wanted to get inside. I tried writing a letter. I don't know who it was for. Maybe myself, maybe someone who'd find the place after I vanished. But every time I tried to write, the paper soaked through, even indoors. I hadn't left the house in days by that point. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want to. Because every time I opened the door, I felt it. A pressure, like something waiting just beyond the tree line, breathing in sync with the storm. And then came the final straw. I went to take a shower. When I turned the knob, nothing came out at first. Then, slowly, water began to drip from the faucet. But it wasn't from the pipes. It was rainwater. And it whispered as it fell. I should have left. I know that now. But at the time, I kept convincing myself it was all in my head, that stress and isolation were messing with me, that I needed sleep, food, maybe to call someone and just talk. But even when I tried, my voice would crack, or get caught in my throat, or worse, I'd hear an echo of it, like someone was saying the same thing a second after I did. Only they were just outside the window, mimicking me. That was the worst part. The mimicry. It began with whispers, then actual phrases, and then, one night, I heard myself say something I never said. "Come outside, Evan, just for a moment." It was my voice, my exact tone. Same breath pattern, but I hadn't said a word. I turned off the lights and pressed my ear to the door, and there it was, my own voice whispering back at me from the other side. "It's safe now. I promise I didn't sleep. Not even an hour. Just waited for dawn. When the sun didn't rise, when everything stayed this murky, storm-sick grey, I realized maybe the sun wasn't coming back at all. That day, I noticed a new sound in the rain. It wasn't just the whispering or the mimicry. It was sobbing, soft, choked weeping. It echoed through the pipes, behind the walls, inside the drains, like someone was trapped in the plumbing, crying to get out. I ripped the kitchen sink apart. Nothing. Pulled the covers off the vents. Still nothing. But every time I looked away, the weeping started again. It sounded like my ex at first, then my mother, then me. That night I had a dream. Or maybe it was something else. I was standing in the rain, barefoot, surrounded by dozens of others, all standing still, all facing the cabin. Their skin was wet, grey, bloated, like they'd drowned. Some of them looked familiar. One of them looked just like me. When I woke up, my hands were covered in mud. I found dirty footprints leading from the front door to my bedroom, and the door was still locked from the inside. That's when the memories started bleeding back. The accident. It had been raining that night too. I'd lost control. My car hit a tree. I was dazed but alive. The paramedics said I was lucky. The other car didn't make it. I never saw the driver's face, never even checked. Just sat there, shivering in the wreckage until someone pulled me out. I thought I'd buried that night. But now, I wasn't so sure. The rain outside wasn't just weather. It was familiar, like it remembered me. And now it wanted me to remember it. I kept the front door bolted and didn't answer the windows anymore, no matter what voice I heard calling. But then came the worst moment of all. I was staring out the fogged-up window in the living room, watching the downpour, when I saw something moving at the tree line. It wasn't walking, it was crawling, pale limbs bent the wrong way, hair hanging wet across its face. The moment it reached the clearing, it stood. Slowly, unnaturally, and looked up at the cabin. Its eyes didn't reflect light, it just stared. Then, it smiled. Not with lips, with the whole face. I backed away, shaking, and knocked over a lamp. By the time I got the flashlight, the thing was gone. But the rain hadn't stopped. It never stopped. And I swear to God, from that point on, the whispering started inside the cabin. It no longer needed the windows. It had found a way in. I started blacking out. I don't mean falling asleep. I mean losing time. 1 minute I'd be in the kitchen, making instant coffee. The next, I'd be outside, barefoot, drenched, standing at the edge of the woods. I wouldn't even feel cold until I looked down and realized my hands were muddy. My toes sunk into soaking earth. The first time it happened, I convinced myself I'd sleepwalked. The second time, I nearly stepped into the creek at the edge of the property, and I had no idea how I got there. The third time, I woke up kneeling in the living room, facing the front door, The floor beneath me was soaked, and carved into the wood in long, shallow scratches was one word. Stay. Not written, etched. Like someone had dragged wet fingers across the floor, slow, deliberate, and deep enough to leave grooves. I couldn't stop shaking after that. I tried to leave. I really tried, but the truck was still sunk in mud. The road was impassable. Every time I walked more than 100 yards into the trees, I ended up back at the cabin, no matter the direction. I started marking the trees to prove I wasn't going in circles, but every tree I marked showed up again. Same scar, same moss pattern, same bent branches. The forest had become wrong. At one point, I thought I saw a break in the clouds, a sliver of sky, and I sprinted toward it. But when I reached the clearing, it was gone. And there, in the center of the opening, was something that stopped me dead. My voice recorder, the one I'd left inside the house, sitting perfectly upright on a stone, still blinking red, still recording. And beneath it, half buried in mud, was a notebook. My notebook. I picked it up. The cover was ruined, soaked through, but inside, somehow, the pages were dry. Too dry. I flipped through them. Every page was filled with my handwriting, but I never wrote any of it. It detailed everything that had happened so far. The rain, the footprints, the whispers, my blackouts. But it went further. It described things that hadn't happened yet. Things like, I woke up in the attic, even though there is no attic. The rain shaped itself into a face, and it watched me while I pretended to sleep. I heard myself praying in the basement I don't remember building. And then the last line, he is not alone in the house anymore. I dropped the book and ran. When I got back to the cabin, the front door was open, just swinging, and there were footprints, wet ones, leading into the hallway. The rain had followed me inside. I lit every candle I could find, drew salt lines across the door, even tried those old rituals I used to read about as a teenager. Circles, chants, anything. I sat in the center of the living room, surrounded by flickering flames and water stains that had grown into dark spirals on the walls. That's when I heard something above me, not on the roof, in the ceiling, a scraping sound, slow, dragging, like fingernails across wood. But there's no crawl space up there, no attic. At least, there wasn't supposed to be. I grabbed the stepladder and flashlight, climbed up, shoved the ceiling panel open. It wasn't empty. There was a space up there now, cramped, dark, smelling like mildew and rot. And in the beam of my flashlight, I saw a pair of bare feet, dangling. Then a whisper, directly beside my ear, not from above. You finally looked. That night, something changed. Not just in the house, in me. I could feel it. Like the rain had gotten inside, not just under the roof, but under my skin. I stayed awake until dawn, or what would have been dawn, except there was no light. The storm was heavier than ever. The sky was a permanent shade of ash, and the forest outside looked like it had sunk into itself. Even the trees were leaning toward the cabin now. I had one last idea. I set up my old camera system. Cheap, motion-triggered trail cams I used to mess with when I went hiking. 4 of them. 1 at each corner of the cabin. 1 facing the hallway inside. If I was going to die out here, I wanted to know what did it. That night, I turned off all the lights, sat in the living room, and watched the monitor hooked up to the hallway cam. Nothing. Nothing for hours. Then, sometime after 3 a.m., the motion light blinked on in the hallway, and I saw something step into frame. It was me, standing at the far end of the hallway, soaking wet. Blank expression, motionless. But here's the thing. I was still sitting in the living room, staring at the screen, holding the remote. I stood up and backed toward the corner of the room, heart pounding. The hallway version of me didn't move, just stood there, arms limp at his sides, head tilted slightly, like it was waiting for me to notice it. And then it smiled. Not with its mouth, with its eyes. Wide, gaping wet sockets that curled at the edges. I turned off the monitor and barricaded the door. It didn't matter. Moments later, I heard footsteps, wet ones, on the hardwood floor. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. I ran into the bathroom, slammed the door shut, locked it, and crouched in the tub with the recorder. That's what you're hearing now. If this file ever gets out, if someone finds this, just know that it looks like me. It sounds like me. It knows what I remember, what I regret, what I dream about when I try to sleep. And it wants in. The lights just flickered. There's water creeping in under the door. Not a leak, not a pipe burst, just rain. Pouring in, forming a perfect circle around the tub, the same spiral shape that was on the walls, and now I hear it, my voice, but wrong. It's behind the door, and it's saying, "You shouldn't have survived. Let me back in. Let me be you again." The doorknob is turning. I can't stop it.